Good evening. It's budget time. The Finance Minister got up in the House of Parliament and presented what must be considered the single most important annual economic statement of the government. The budget of 1989 has just begun. We hope to give you, over the next hour or so, a blow-by-blow account of his speech as it is read out. Of course, we're not actually allowed to go and get extracts from the speech, as it is allowed in other countries, but maybe that will come sometime in the future. At the moment, we will just get messages over tickers from various sources, like the UNI and PTI networks. But apart from just giving you news, we will try and give you an on-the-spot analysis by a team of experts who will try and tell us what the budget means really to you and me. As I said, the Finance Minister started his speech a few minutes ago and is still at the really introductory stages of the budget. So nothing really has properly been announced. The first part, he basically talks about the economy, etc. And it's only in about 10 or 15 minutes that we'll start getting hard news. We have links all over the country. One, of course, from the Lok Sabha, and we'll bring you a proper live output from the Lok Sabha shortly. But apart from that, we'll be going to the stock exchange in Bombay. Now, this is actually the Finance Minister arriving earlier this afternoon at Parliament, and what's in that box in his hands. I wish we all knew. This was him giving last-minute touches to the budget speech. You can see a footnote there. It looks like a fairly long speech, so maybe we're here for some time. Later on, of course, the Prime Minister also arrives at Parliament and is, of course, a significant input in any budget. At about 4 o'clock, a cabinet meeting is held where the budget is then shared with the rest of the cabinet members. Here we have both the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. Now, apart from actually going all over the country, we would like to hear from viewers who are interested in the budget. We would like you to phone in, and we'll be giving you the numbers very shortly as to what numbers you can ring and ask questions of our panel. Now, here they are. Viewers can call our panel and specify individuals. If you're in Delhi or around the Delhi area, please phone in at 381913. There are 3 lines there, and there's a hunting facility in all these lines. In Bombay, 4922-699. If you're near Bombay, phone there or in Bombay. Calcutta, 463-435 and 6. That's for the Calcutta and neighboring regions. And Madras, 567-442. We'll be repeating that once again at about 15 minutes from now, but if you've taken them down, start thinking of a question. And what we will be doing is actually asking you live on the air to talk to the panel. We'll be taking 5 or 6. Last year we had 500 or 600 phone calls. I'm afraid we'll only have to be selective, but we'll be doing it again. We do have an early flavor of the budget. Before we go out, let's have a look at what's actually been said in the speech. Inflation, he's talking about the economy here. Inflation is 9.8% as on February 6th. That's when the latest figure came out, compared to 21% in 1979-80. That's the last big drought year. So what the Finance Minister is trying to say is that in a drought year, he's done half as badly as last time, or half as well as last time, whichever way you'd like to look at it. Coal production, he's talking about the infrastructure sector being rather proud about it. Coal is up 10.2, which is a fairly remarkable achievement. We know the coal sector has been fairly stagnant over the years. And power up 7.6. Now, power has done better in the last 2 or 3 years, but 7.6 is not bad. On the whole, what the Finance Minister at the moment is saying to the MPs in the Lok Sabha is that we've had an awful year, but because of the drought, but in spite of that, there are certain sectors, inflation has not been too bad, and the infrastructure sectors are doing well. But let's see whether the rest of the country agrees with him. We'll go over first to the stock exchange in Bombay for a quick look at their expectations.
Good evening, viewers. This is Sanjeev Manchanda welcoming you to the Stock Exchange in Bombay. At this moment, I'm speaking to you from the 25th floor of the Stock Exchange building. Below me on the trading ring, there are about 2,200 people expectantly gathered to hear what the Finance Minister has to say in this budget and the effect on the various scrips and securities. An interesting feature about the trends has been that prior to the presentation of the economic survey, the share prices have been in a very depressed condition. After the presentation of the survey, the trend has been slightly arrested, and the same arresting has continued on the eve of the budget here. In the forenoon session of trading, it has been observed that the activity has been around 20 to 25 crores, which, as compared to the earlier day of 15 to 20 crores, is a definite improvement. On the trading floor today, there is for the first time the PTI stock scanner, which will make available to the public the up-to-date information on all the scrips in the country. The camera will now take you over to the trading ring for a close look at what is going on. We now take you over to Calcutta.
Good afternoon. This is Tushar Pandit reporting from Bada Bazar Posta in Calcutta. Bada Bazar begins where the famous landmark Howrah Bridge ends on the western bank of Ganges, and it has been a trading mart since late 16th century. It's now among the major markets for commodity and wholesale, and every day goods and services worth more than rupees 50 crores are bought and sold here. The general feeling among the traders here are that there is going to be a stiff dose of taxes. Although some of the businessmen believe that there may be some incentives to revive the stock market, which has been rather dull for a couple of months now. The trade that Bada Bazar and Posta conducts are in oilseeds, food grains, iron, tea, garments, yarns, and other commodities, and it caters to the needs of entire eastern and northeastern region, apart from about 1 billion people living in and around Calcutta. Now there is a lot of expectations and anticipations as to what the budget proposals will be, and most of the traders here have now glued to their radio sets or watching the television for what is in the store.
Well, we'll be going to Madras shortly and then to Delhi to get some consumer reactions in Delhi and trade union leaders in Madras. But before we do that, we have had another flash from the budget. The budget says, the finance minister has just said that the revised deficit is at 6,080 crores. That's up 6.9%. Now that's very significant. Now we'll come to I'll ask the panel exactly how important that is, because the finance minister, the prime minister last year had announced a deficit of 5,688. So while it's 1,000 crores up, it's probably less than most people expected in a drought year, but I'll get reactions from the panel. Defense, on the other hand, is up to 13,000 crores for 88-89. That means projected for next year is 13,000 compared to 12,000 last year. That's 7.7%. Now 7.7% is less than the wholesale price index increase, which was 10%. So it's actually a real decline in the defense expenditure. But before we go on for actual analysis of this, maybe first introduce the panel. Dr. Bimal Jalan is here, who's furiously scribbling something. He's a familiar face, Secretary at the Ministry of Finance and Chief Economic Advisor. Obviously an ideal person to tell us where we've gone wrong and where we are right. Next to him is Lakshmi Jain. Actually, he's on the other side. Another familiar face who's said some extremely important things in our earlier budget programs. He's Director industrial development services, but is more than just he knows about industry. He knows about, I think we'd say, the people of India. Then we can move over to Kirit Parekh. Kirit is the director of the new Institute of Development Research set up by the RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, in Bombay. It's a magnificent place. It's a new institute, and we could go on about it, but we have great hopes for the institute, and it's great to have the director with us here. And last but certainly not least, because we expect the most pungent comments from the press, we have the editor of nothing else, nothing better than the Economic Times, Manu Shroff, who's been writing a lot about economic matters, both in editorials and in actual reports, and has been in the government many years ago. So we have this panel, and I'd first like to get a reaction of Bimal. Can I ask you, Bimal, about the deficit? The Prime Minister said the deficit is high, I don't like it. That is 5,688. It's now 7%, 6.9% above what he said. Why was that? Why couldn't he stick to 5,688?
No, I think, Pranay, these are qualitative statements. When you are talking about numbers like 5,700 or 5,800, a difference of 200-300 crores on this side or that side is not unusual. There's just no way of precisely sort of hitting a particular target in a budget of 65 or 66,000 crores. This is the best estimate, and I would say that this substantially sort of meets the promise that the Prime Minister had given. Notwithstanding the fact that it was a bad year, drought year and so on and so forth. But I would like to hear Kirit.
Yes, Kirit,
what do you think of it?
Were you hoping for it to stay at exactly 5,688, or do you think that would have been a purely political?
No, I think even this figure that you see, it seems to me to be a somewhat political figure. We could have had a larger budget. Anyway, the growth rate could have been at least as much as the growth rate of inflation, or the increase in the cost of living.
Yes.
And in any case, I think sticking to a predetermined deficit level when you did not know that you had a drought, when you did not know that you had an operation in Sri Lanka, doesn't really match up with this. It would seem that one should have gone for a higher level of
Even
deficit.
a higher level.
Yes.
You feel that in a drought year, sticking to 5,688 or even going just 1,000 crores over it, it could have been a couple of thousand more.
That's right.
So you would have liked to see a little more stimulus. But of course, we'll hear the budget deficit for the coming year shortly, which will see how much they're planning to stimulate. But before we do that, let's quickly go to Madras to see what, get a reaction from trade union leaders in Madras.
Hello, thank you, Pranay. I'm Shanmugh Sundaram reporting from Madras. Watching the program with me are a group of workers and two veteran trade unionists. On my right is Mr. S.C.C. Anthony Pillai, former Member of Parliament, President, Tamil Nadu unit of the Hind Mazdoor Sabha, and the General Secretary of the All India Port and Dock Workers Federation. And we also have Mr. Gurumurthy, yet another veteran trade unionist with over 2 decades of experience behind him. He is also the founder of many labor unions and workers' cooperatives productive council. Well, we'll be watching the program now, and after watching it, we'll get back to you with more reactions.
Right. I just want to decide on whether I should go on to the next item, but I do think the budget deficit is is being debated so hotly. So can I just ask you, Manu, that would you like to have seen a higher thing, or do you think this is fairly well maintained within limits of given that there's been a drought?
In my view, this particular figure has no meaning, because what one should look at is the totality of the deficit, that is total expenditure minus total revenue.
Yes.
And not merely that portion of that deficit which is financed by a particular method,
yes,
like the Reserve Bank's lending to government. If you look at the totality, we don't have the figures as we look at them when they come.
Yes. Well, one actually indication of why the deficit is at its current level is another budget flash that we just have. It says that non-plan expenditure is up 16%. Now that's higher than the 10% rate of inflation, 6% higher. So that's gone a little higher than one would have expected. Non-plan expenditure for next year is 47,869 crores, 47,869 896 crores, which is a real increase of about 6% given a 10% rate of inflation. Before we come to the panel and for later budget estimates, let's go to a shopping center for consumer reactions in Connaught Place. Well, we have a lot of shoppers here who are actually waiting to watch this program on television and actually wait to try and beat the budget price increases. We've had a lot of flashes in newspapers recently saying beat the budget. So this is the last minute shoppers before any hikes come. Lakshmi, can I just ask you in terms of the drought? We know one impact is on the deficit, but what is the real impact on the drought on the country?
Well, as you reported, the finance minister said that the inflation has been manageable, and compared with some other historical year he has done better. But the question is, on whom are we looking at the impact of inflation and the drought combined? Now, as K.L. Sehgal has said, "Jis tan lage, wohi tan ye dukhda jane." If you look at the what is called the wholesale price index, the impact on the agricultural laborers has been out of proportion. When you get an average of 9% or whatever percent you get, these people, as between January and December itself, on primary food articles were 13.88 and on primary non-food articles was 23 plus. Now, in a year of drought, when their number of days of employment have already gone down,
yes,
and then you have this rate of inflation affecting them, then for any finance minister to feel comfortable would wonder whether he has lost sight of these people who form the bulk of the population.
yes.
And when he was deputy chairman of the planning commission, he had made a statement saying inflation is the most regressive form of taxation.
Yes, I
So
think
the
that's a
worst has
quote.
already been done by way of taxation.
Yes, but Lakshmi, to be fair, in a year of a drought, you do expect prices to rise. Do you think keeping it within 10% or so, 9.8, 10, 10.5, whatever it is, do you think that's a reasonable inflation rate overall?
It has to be seen in the context of what was promised last year. We had exactly the same debate.
But at that time, they didn't know there was a drought.
No, but they said that they have enough food stocks and others to be able to manage the inflationary pressures. Drought is not something that's come to us for the first time. There is a cycle about it.
Yes. We have
And any sensible fiscal policy maker, if he says that he did not take into account, then I would say.
Well, we have another budget latest actually from the finance minister's speech in Parliament. Gross tax revenues are 41,985 crores at existing rates. Payments to states and local bodies are rupees 10,682, and net tax revenue is this year 31,303 crores. Now, Dr. Jalan, could I just ask you precisely, when we are saying gross tax revenues are 41,000 and states getting 10,000, net tax revenue 31, could you put that in some kind of perspective?
Meaning thereby?
I mean, what does that mean? Are they higher than last year? Are they lower? You know.
Yes, everything is higher than last year. That you can take for granted. I mean, the receipts
Why?
and so on. You know, I mean, the economy is growing. I mean, there is certain buoyancy, natural buoyancy in tax revenues, quite apart from what other measures you may take. So the perspective, I mean, I do not remember what the figure last year was, but I mean that shows that gross tax revenue and the state share is going to rise quite substantially next year, as far as I can remember.
I wanted to go back to these defense expenditure, Kirit, if I can just ask you. We are seeing that it's 13,000 crores next year compared to 12,000 crores budgeted last year. That's an increase, I think they said, of about 7.7%. That's a real decline in, I mean, given 10% inflation, that's a decline in defense expenditure. Do you welcome that?
I certainly do. I think our defense expenditure has risen so dramatically last year or in the past couple of years that any reduction that we can make in it or any arrest of the growth rate with which we are increasing our defense expenditure is to be welcomed. I think there is too little discussion in the country of how effectively we are spending our defense money, and any change that we can make in that environment would be desirable.
Yeah. Before we just go on to the next budget, we did actually talk to the Finance Minister earlier this morning and also to the Prime Minister. And we have some of his expectations and views, so let's hear what he has to say. First the Finance Minister, then the Prime Minister.
Budget. How do you feel after the difficult exercise of budget preparation is over?
Well, I feel very humble, and this is the first time that I will have this opportunity, and I am very hopeful that I will have the blessings of the people, of the honorable members of the Parliament, and I will be able to reflect the cross-section of public opinion.
A lot of effort would have gone into the process of budget preparation.
Well, it has been a rather difficult exercise for the last 2.5 months.
I hope the country would feel relaxed too after the announcement of your budget.
Well, you know, I hope that because, you know, there is a certain expectation built in always whenever you present a budget. But, you know, this making of an economy and the economic activity is a continuous exercise. So there can be no relaxation that way. But of course, one step will have been taken forward.
Your budget must have been dominated by drought, but I hope you've taken notice of the recent rainfalls. And could the country expect some drizzle of hope from the dark budget clouds?
Well, God has been kind that it has rained yesterday, day before yesterday. It is good for the crops. It is a stabilizing factor for the prices. But whatever I have to say as regards the budget is concerned, that I will say only at 5 p.m. today.
Thank you.
Well, the very experienced Mr. N.D. Tiwari, Bimal, the Finance Minister just said that he hopes that he has the country's blessings. With a 10% inflation rate, do you think he deserves the country's blessings?
No, I think this inflation question is quite important for all of us. Lakshmi, if I might correct, Finance Minister didn't say that he was comfortable with it, not at all. In fact, he has said that I put the highest priority in trying to contain it. But the point, the only point, limited point, restricted point that he made, that in a drought year which was as severe as this, that it was better inflation performance than any previous drought year. I mean, that's a purely statement of statistical fact, as it were. It does not minimize the kind of hardship or whatever problems that have been caused to us as consumers. But I don't think it's fair to sort of put words in his mouth. I mean, he still regards inflation as being the most aggressive of taxes, and that's why he puts such high importance in trying to contain it.
Yes, well, we do have another budget latest, a flash from the tickers from Parliament. These are estimates for next year, 88-89. Assistance to states and union territories provided, rupees 9,714 crores. Plan outlay at 28,715 crores. That's a fairly big step up, and particularly, and I think we're going to get a message of the budget thrust in the budget here. Plan outlay for agriculture is up by 40%. That is a phenomenal increase. Can I have a quick reaction, Manu, on that? Our agriculture up 40% before we have an interview with the Prime Minister. But 40% is, are we getting something about the rest of the budget here?
I think it's a very good move, because the perception of almost everybody, that is one thing on which economists are agreed in this country, that for the last 4 years agriculture has been stagnant, and whatever we can do for revving up production in agriculture is necessary. Now, centre alone cannot do it. It's mostly to be done by the state governments, but I think centre giving importance to it is very, very good.
Well, we did ask actually about the importance of the budget and which aspects are most critical to the Prime Minister, who was the Finance Minister last year and has seen the economy through the year.
Prime Minister, you prepared last year's budget as a Finance Minister. How has the economy done since then?
Under the circumstances, the economy has done very well. We've gone through a very difficult year with drought, widespread drought, a second year of severe drought, and added to that all the sort of after effects of the pay commission. But in spite of that, the economy has done fairly well. The management of the drought has been very good, and if you compare it with any previous drought, even of a much smaller magnitude, we've done well. That doesn't mean there aren't problems. A lot needs to be done.
What can we expect from this year's budget? Is it going to be soft?
Well, you'll have to wait till 5 o'clock for that. But we've tried to project our priorities and our philosophy in the budget. And of course, within the constraints that we've been put into because of the drought and the pay commission problems that I mentioned earlier. But we've tried to reflect the direction that we want to give. A lot also needs to be done on controlling government spending. That's still too high. We've been making government more efficient, especially in the infrastructure areas. It's done well. But this is a slow process and a lot more work is required.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, the Prime Minister did say there that the budget is going to show what the government's priorities are. Kirit, 40% up in agriculture, that's obviously every year, and I'll ask Lakshmi after that. He probably remembers last year was a big thrust to education. But 40% in agriculture, is that a bit too high, or do you think it's pegged at the right level?
No, I think last year's was, I think, around 900 crores, if I'm not mistaken, and 40% is only an addition of perhaps 400 crores more.
This is plan outlay.
Yeah, this is plan outlay for agriculture. And I think certainly we can absorb that much, and that can be absorbed more effectively as well. So I think this is a good thing. One could even have thought of putting more money in agriculture in some areas, particularly if one can combine many of the redistributive programs also with agricultural development program. It is somewhat a question of how you allocate and how you count your money, but nonetheless I think this is a good step.
Lakshmi, you were just talking about the impact of the drought. Is that a welcome sign, 40% up there?
By any agricultural allocation, I think is welcome, so I would not say much about that. But when you say impact on the drought, the Prime Minister and his cabinet colleagues had a presentation made by the Center for Science and Environment, and they explained to the cabinet that the contribution you are making to the damage to the environment has increased the incidence of drought and floods. Therefore, it is not enough to say we have put in more money for agriculture, but the negative destructive activity
of the
where large dams, large projects, according to Government of India's own admission, 9.5 million hectares of vegetation cover has been destroyed. Now your 400 crores are not going to replace that.
Right. We do have another budget flash. We had a huge increase in education last year, so we're looking at what are the thrusts this year. We've seen agriculture, and there it is, education gets it again. It gets 1,550 crores, that's up by about 31% from 11,185 crores last year. That's another thrust area on the budget. Bimal, you are shaking your pen. Is there something?
Some mistake in your transmission. I mean, the education figure that you have got, I think that must have got transposed from some other figure.
I see, so not up 31%.
No,
so we'll wait for confirmation on that.
It might be useful to check it out.
Yeah, if we could get that checked out, the inflation, the figure on education. But there is another important thing. The government is always trying to cut back expenditure, which the Prime Minister just said in his interview. But one area which is finding very difficult is the interest payable. We have a budget flash on that. Interest payable 889 will be 14,100 crores. That's up 2,650 crores, which is 23%. Now that's a fairly large increase. Interest payable is part of non-planned expenditure, something the government constantly wants to control. Bimal, how come it's 23% up this year?
That's the problem. I mean, I think that the fact that our total borrowings are rising, I mean, that's a fact, and that has to be recognized as a bit of a problem in the economy. And it's a purely accounting sense. I mean, that there is a large amount of borrowing, and that the interest payments have to be met. In that sense, it is, I mean, it's just there. You have to do something about it.
We will get that figure on education checked out. You bear with us. We're trying to get things as quickly across to you as possible. As he finishes speaking about it, we get it over the tickers, and we'll get it verified again. But before we go on any further, we'll go over to Madras for a reaction from trade union leaders of what's been announced so far.
Mr. Pillai, you have been watching the program so far. What do you feel about the whole thing?
Last time when the budget was presented, it was stated that there will be no further increase in deficit financing. It has gone up only by nearly 1,000 crores. There's nothing surprising to me when you take into account the number of lobbies asking for this and that and the other, and therefore 1,000 crores increase on the deficit is nothing surprising. It is not more than the deficit that was operating a couple of years ago.
I see. How about you, Mr. Gurumurthy? What do you think about it?
As far as the deficit finance is concerned, it shows to the prosperity of the country, provided you use the monies that are coming out for covering up the deficit finance to make inputs for manufacturing processes. That will certainly raise the standard of living of the people and also the economy of the people on that particular point.
I see.
As far as the inflation is concerned, we are happy that the finance minister brought it down to 9.8, but anyway it is near the two-digit figure. He himself was not happy that it is the norm that could be expected, but whatever efforts he takes to see that it goes down will be a healthy feature as far as we are concerned. Then the manufacturing increase in coal and power is a good sign for the manufacturing industries, which is a very constant struggle to get these two items for manufacturing. It will help the manufacturing powers. Then as far as the defense increase is concerned, with threat all over our borders, it is absolutely necessary that we keep our defense up to date as far as the technology is concerned. It's a good thing that has been done. It's a welcome feature. Then as far as the non-finance, non-plan expenditure is concerned, it all depends upon the channelization, how we are going to use it.
Well, thank you. We'll get back to you again.
Well, one question I would have liked to ask, which was flashed as they were speaking, was the fact that fertilizer and food subsidies are up about 20% this year. That's about 1,000 crores. Now, Manu, can I just ask you, this is going up every year by about 10, 15, 20%. Are you in favor of stopping it and raising food prices and fertilizer prices, or do you think these are correct subsidies that should be maintained?
Well, I don't think the fertilizer subsidy is a correct subsidy, because it's not a subsidy to the farmer, it's a subsidy to the industry. But we can't get rid of it in a drought year. It's not an easy thing to do. I think one should have a long-term plan for both these food and fertilizer subsidies. Over a period of 4 or 5 years, if you have a long-term objective, then I think it should be possible to do it. But let me go back to the interest figure which was mentioned by Bimal.
Yes. I think could you repeat what it was?
Yeah, I think the interest charges have gone up to 14,000 crores or something like that.
Right. Just for the
now,
viewers.
I think it is not something which we can say that it is there. I mean, it's bound to be there if you keep on borrowing, if you keep on covering your revenue deficit on your current account by borrowing from the Reserve Bank. You are bound to get into this situation. I think it is a somewhat complacent attitude to say it is there.
I see. Bimal, I'll need your help on the latest budget flash, which says, if we can have the flash, it says that LPG in hill areas to cost the same as on the plains. That means, I presume that means an increase, Bimal? What is that?
No. I mean, that means a decrease. I mean, the idea is that there was
the
transport charge.
I see. Right.
So that is being removed.
And this second factor, can we have that flash again, please? It says massive Kutir Jyoti scheme, by which poor households get single light point. I think every single household is...
Yes, Pranay, I think that you are getting this in somewhat sort of, not in the sequence in which they have been broadcast, but possibly because of transmission delays. This LPG in hill areas also includes kerosene. I mean, that's the more important announcement, that kerosene and LPG.
So both these have been reduced, is it? Sorry.
Yes, that's right. So far as the hilly areas are concerned, there was a freight surcharge being added, that is being removed. So the nearest point on the plains, the kerosene and the LPG price would be the same in hilly areas as in the nearest point on the plains. But there are a number of other announcements which probably you'll be getting back, which are much more, I mean, I think in terms of agriculture, a whole new package has been announced, which I think we should wait for.
Yeah, probably be coming any minute. So we'll be looking forward to this thrust on agriculture, which first indications came with this 40% increase in plan outlay, which is a massive increase. But we do have, before we get the next flash, which is coming in any minute, we do have an interview with leader of the opposition, Mr. Madhu Dandavate, about his expectation of the budget and what he would do if he was finance minister.
If you were the finance minister, what would be the major thrust areas of your budget?
Firstly, I feel that the entire economy has to be taken away from the traditional rut in which it has been traveling. And therefore, basic changes like more stress on self-reliance, then the resource mobilization in a manner that will give more impetus to the economy. And rather than allowing the economy to rely only on the vagaries of the rains as far as agricultural economy is concerned, better water management that will try to remove the aberrations that are created by drought conditions.
How do you feel that the budget deficit could be contained?
So really speaking, larger deficits are due to the fact that we have a large defense expenditure in which the component of imports is very high. Then public sector has not been able to mop up as much surplus as is necessary. And thirdly, we find that as far as the agricultural economy is concerned, the water management is not proper. If these are rationalized, and also at the same time, in conformity with self-reliance, if the dependence on external debts and internal borrowing is reduced. For instance, I will point out to you that the external debt service charges are to the tune of 2,084 crores of rupees. That's a very heavy thing. That means the debt ratio is almost 24% of the total earnings. And as far as internal borrowings are concerned, the 70% of the new borrowings are utilized to pay the interest on the old borrowings. And therefore we are caught in a debt trap. It has to be avoided.
But what are your expectations from this year's budget?
You see, even prior to the budget, 2,769 crores of levies are already imposed. And in a way the sanctity of the budget has been destroyed. But despite these heavy levies that have come prior to the budget, I think looking to the extent of deficit in the entire 7-5-year plan, they were expected to have 14,000 crores of deficit. And already with 2 years left to the 7th plan, we have crossed 18,000 crores. So with such heavy deficit, I think it will be a hard budget, not a soft one.
Well, we'll be going across later on in about a few minutes to ask the Governor of the Reserve Bank about the level of the deficit this year, which we know earlier on was 1,000 crores above what the Prime Minister said, approximately 1,000 crores, which is I think was 6.7%, but we'll get a comment on that. But meanwhile, let's just see what's happened so far in the budget. It's obviously a longer than normal budget speech, but the main point so far as follows. There's a thrust on revitalizing the drought-hit economy. Exports are up. Inflation is about 10% as on February the 6th. Industrial production up by 10.2%, doing well in a drought year. Deficit 6,080 crores. Oh, that's about 400 crores more than. It's a small amount more than what the Prime Minister had announced last year. Plan outlay has gone up to 28,715 crores, which is a massive increase, and we'll get the exact percentage increase in real terms in a few minutes. For agriculture, though, it's a 40% hike. That must be welcome news for the farmers, particularly after the drought-hit year. Non-plan expenditure has been up 16%. That's a 6% real increase, given inflation is 10%. Food and fertilizer subsidies are up 20%. Our panelists generally feel that that's good in a drought year, although fertilizer there's some comment about, but food certainly. There's a new scheme, Kisan Vikas Patra, to boost rural savings. I think there was some talk about rural taxation, but certainly we're trying to tap savings from the rural areas. And defense expenditure up, or actually in real terms, down, because inflation has been 10% and this is 7.7. So in terms of defense, we've got a slight cutback this year, which has been reasonably welcome, but we've had information on the deficit. It's about 400 crores more than last year. And why is deficit important? It goes through from deficit to money supply and through prices. So it's been contained well below year before last. But let's just go across to the Governor of the Reserve Bank and ask him his views on this.
Thank you, Pranay, and good evening, viewers. I have with me over here the Reserve Bank Governor, Mr. Malhotra, and I would like to ask him Very pointed question, because we've been hearing in the other panel, in Pranay's panel, that there has been a lot of discussion about the deficit and the inflation. Now, what I would like you to explain to our viewers is that why is it that the deficit has such a close relationship with inflation? How would you explain it to a lay person?
Well, the deficit ultimately means that the Reserve Bank has to provide more money. That comes through created money, and created money leads to a larger growth in money supply, which naturally impinges on the goods and services available in the economy. Therefore, if the rate of growth of money is out of line with the rate of growth in nominal income, then it is bound to exercise an inflationary impact on the economy. And inflation is important in a country where most of the people are poor.
How would you explain the fact that in a country like India, where there is a lot of excess capacity, a lot of surplus labor, your idea about more money chasing little goods, how do you explain that we still have inflation with increasing deficit? One would expect that it wouldn't be this large an amount, that deficit financing we shouldn't have to worry about.
Well, if the historical evidence is important, it does appear that budgetary deficits have accounted for 80 to 90% of the increase in money supply. And the record actually has been that whenever money supply has been out of line, prices have gone up.
Okay, I think the viewers have got a reasonably good idea as to why deficit and inflation are related. Now, I would like to ask you one other question, since you're the nation's banker and you'll be knowing it very well. Given this year of increased spending by the government because of the drought, how has it affected the money supply? You're saying that it has been kept under reasonably good control, or has it been increased beyond proportions?
Yes, I think it has remained under reasonable control. The aim of monetary policy this year, considering the drought situation and the resultant decrease in the rate of growth and the evolution on the price front, was to keep the growth of money supply well below last year's rate of growth. And as of now, it is running about 2.5%.
If I can interrupt you, do you think that this would affect the credit that is given out to industries?
No,
or
we
to other commercial
we have tried to ensure that it would not starve the productive sectors of the economy of credit. Therefore, the position now is that it is running at about 2.5% below the rate of growth last year. So far as the credit situation is concerned, what has happened is that along with the decline of food stocks, the level of food credit has gone down, and that has enabled us to push up the rate of credit on the non-plant side, or on the non-food credit, and therefore no credit squeeze has developed so far.
Okay, thank you very much. And now I think I will ask Pranay to see what's going on in his side of this panel.
Well, you have Professor Hanumanta Rao there, and I wanted to give a quick budget flash because it will be very important, interesting to get his views on that. The budget latest says rural banks' target of finance raised to 17%, fertilizer prices cut by 7.5. Again, I think this is in the general thrust of goodies for the agricultural sector. I have some other flashes here. Interest rates on loans for farmers reduced by 1.5 to 2.5%. We've got that 7.5% reduction in fertilizers. Pesticides are to be cheaper because import duty has been reduced, the levy has been reduced, and there's a new agricultural credit relief fund being set up. Basically a whole host of thrusts in the budget, expenditure and reliefs for the agricultural sector. And I think earlier in the week and during the last month, in fact, the general government thrust the agricultural sector this year seems to have been unfolding. In fact, yesterday there was an announcement, and obviously it's been carried through in this budget. If you can quickly ask Professor Hanumanta Rao what his views are on this and whether he finds them welcome or going too far.
Sure, Pranay. Professor Rao, I would like you to react to what you must have heard Pranay just now saying.
See, many of these concessions for agriculturists have to be looked at from the short-term point of view of drought. See, some of the things may not be justifiable from the long-term point of view. For instance, as Mr. Manushra pointed out, fertilizer subsidy may not be desirable, at least to the extent it is given now, from the long-term point of view. But considering that we have a severe drought this year, and Rabi output is very sensitive to fertilizer use, I think some kind of subsidy from a short-term point of view may be justifiable. And in general, the support seems to be on the input front, whether it is credit or pesticides, fertilizers. I personally think it is always desirable to give relief on the input side rather than merely on the price side, the price of produce. This will promote investment by the farmers in agriculture. So considering the drought this year and the need to step up agricultural output, I think these are broadly in the desirable direction.
Could I ask you one other question on that? See, you have said that for drought years, this sort of expenditure is good, especially boosting agriculture. Now, we have seen historically that recessions have usually followed drought years. Now, from what we know about the budget so far, can you think as to what will happen to recession in the next year or the coming year, given the drought this year?
Yes, I was talking about the agricultural production when I was supporting some of the subsidies. So to the extent agricultural output can increase, this will have a favorable impact on the even recessionary situation, because the recession that is feared now in the next 6 months or so will be because of declining the purchasing power of the farmers because of drought. So to the extent all these investments in agriculture, they contribute to the rise in the incomes of the farmers, the recessionary impact on industry should be lower.
Thank you, Professor Rao. Pranay.
Oh, well, we do have another budget thrust, I think. There is a budget latest on housing. Government is planning to do a fair amount in housing. Again, firstly, for the farmers. HUDCO to launch a housing scheme for small farmers. Bimal, why don't you elucidate as we are talking about it. Land Development Bank to undertake finance, and banks to increase lending for housing to rupees 300 crores. And I do have a flash with me which says a separate fund of rupees 100 crores has been set up for rural housing. Bimal, this is again on the basic thrust of agriculture. We've seen all kinds of benefits for the agricultural sector in this budget. Is this part just a reaction to the drought, or is it seen to kind of revitalize this part of the economy?
No, Pranay, I think the drought is certainly the most important factor behind this whole package. And the finance minister, as you saw it on TV screen, has announced a whole new package as promised by the Prime Minister, I think, a few days ago or a couple of weeks ago, that something new is going to come for agriculture. I mean, this, as I think Professor Hanumanta Rao was saying, and quite rightly, consists of a strategy of reducing cost of inputs. You know, this is all productive expenditure. And so far as the fertilizer thing is concerned, you must tie it up with the fact that the stocks of fertilizer with companies are very high. So what the finance minister has said is that the government is going to ask the companies to give a 7.5% discount. I mean, in the sense that there is no point on sitting on pile of fertilizers in the country, but to reduce this for the next Kharif and Rabi, and that this would reduce costs of companies, inventory costs of companies. So this is one thing. Then the second thing is, of course, the pesticides. But the most important thing is what the Governor Malhotra is going to announce, or must have announced by now, by 6 p.m. I think, is in regard to the crop loans. I mean, that is where a major interest rate reduction has been given. There is another program being launched this year, which I think I'm sure Professor Rao would endorse entirely, the program called Jaldhara, I mean, in which for the drought-prone areas or drought areas, a whole program of pump sets for farmers. I think that is another very important new program. And this agricultural credit relief fund that has been a long-standing demand, as you know, Pranay, of farmers for drought and so on.
Yes, yes.
And that is being done. Probably I'm speaking too long.
No, that's fine. We did need some elucidation.
But I thought that I'd put it the whole thing
I think because there's such a thrust on agriculture, we do want to know exactly what's going on. But some very, very important information has just come up. If I can just go into the plan, central plan, and Kirit, can I ask you to comment on it? It'll take a bit of time to go through exactly these figures. But this is how the central plan, which is meant to be the sort of thrust of the economy, has been faring over the last 4 years. Now, I think the extreme right percentage figure is most important. In the first year of the plan, in real terms, the expenditure was 21.5% of the plan. In the second year, it was 23.8. That's the second figure down on the right. And in the third year, 87, 88, it was up to 23.5. And this year, in real terms, the percentage of the plan is 24.9. So in the 4 years so far, the government has covered 93.7% of the plan at 85, 86 prices. That means in real terms. That means despite a drought here, Kirit, they have tended to maintain a very strong thrust on the plan sector in real terms, in fact.
This indeed is really quite good, but one would like to look at the details of how these numbers have been worked out. But if what it seems is really correct, I think this is really remarkable, and it's to be welcomed that we have been able to achieve the plan in real terms. In the past, we have always achieved a plan in monetary and current price terms. This may be one of the first plans when we are achieving it in real terms, if it really is true. I doubt it.
Well, we'll have to get precise figures on that later, but we'll verify them. We do have a quick budget latest, what Bimal was saying. Let's get it confirmed. There is a Jal Dhara scheme. I think that budget latest flash was just removed. But in any case, Manu, in terms of the thrust of the plan, do you see this as a welcome continuation of such a high amount spending, or would you like to see in a slightly reduced amount in a drought year like this?
No, in terms of total spending, I think agriculture doesn't constitute a large percentage of the central budget.
No, the plan I was talking about, sorry.
The totality of the
central
plan, I would have liked it to be cut a little more than, allowing about 15%, 13% growth in 1 year, particularly in a year like this. We don't know what the next year's deficit is likely to be. We've only been told 6,080 crores is this year's deficit.
Yes, but and we should actually get that very straight. 6,080 crores, which is 392 crores above what was promised. That's a very low increase. Actually, very close to the
what was promised, and what Bimal here said, he did not like it too. Well, he likes it now, I suppose. But anyway, that is it. Yeah. But next year's deficit we don't.
Do you like it?
I don't like it, but as I said earlier, I don't particularly attach importance to this particular number.
Yes.
I think it's the total deficit, which is almost equal to 10% of the GDP. That is more important in my view.
Yes, yes. Lakshmi, we haven't had any comment from you on the central plan. Do you think that's a welcome sign that it's maintaining that, or would you like to see a slight cutback this year?
Well, Kirit was saying let's get these numbers. Now, to be fair to Bimal, I can't say we can't trust these numbers. But what are the implications? This means that within 4 years, we have already over 90% of the plan at 85, 86 prices we have done.
Yes.
Are we then saying that in the 7th plan there is not only no resource crunch, we will really end up by investing much more than 3,00,000 crores that we had planned to invest? Is that the position?
Well, let's be clear, there's 180,000 crores was the total plan, of which 95,000...
That was for the public sector only.
95,000 was the government central plan. Now, we're talking about the government central plan because that's what's actually announced. But I should say those figures are estimated, that was not announced in the parliament, just the current year's outlay and all the previous year's outlays have been made. All the rest are estimates.
Plan means we must take into account the central and state activity together.
Yeah, no, this is the central plan.
This is
the central plan.
But when we say 1,80,000 crores on the public sector, is that entirely a central government investment?
The center plus states. 95,000 is the center. I'm talking about the 95,000 central plan. That's what it was actually about.
No, but if they have kept up higher investment in the central sector, I would like to know what has been its implication in terms of deprivation at the state level.
Yes.
Because here you draw Reserve Bank credit also. It's not called overdraft.
Yes.
But in this case of the state, within 7 days they have to clear it. So what exactly is the implication?
We'll be in fact asking the Reserve Bank Governor precisely about that overdraft point, because I think it is an important issue which we must go into. But we do have a budget latest again. The power sector gets a lot of money. It gets 3,963 crores. Petroleum gets 3,395 crores. Coal up. And telecommunications receives almost 2,000 crores. Bimal, these again major thrust areas?
I think in terms of
infrastructure.
I mean, yes. I mean, the idea is to keep the infrastructure investments going. But the major thrust in this year, I think, was really agriculture, irrigation, rural development, and that group of activities which have been affected by drought. But here, an effort has been made to keep the infrastructure investment going.
We have a quick budget latest, and then we'll go to the Bombay Stock Exchange. We must be wondering if the government is spending all this money, where is it going to raise the taxes from? But the budget latest says small industries bank to be set up, so that's something for the stock exchange. I wonder if they'll have time to react by the time we get to them. A single window working capital scheme up to 2.5 lakhs. That means working capital is available up to 2.5. Bimal, you can talk.
Yes, may I just explain that? I mean, if you...
Yes, please go ahead. While it's on, there's no problem.
Yes, one is that there is a new bank being set up for small industries. I mean, this was a long-standing demand, and this is being set up as a... This work was being done by Industrial Development Bank of India, as some of you know. Now, they are going to set up a new bank which would exclusively cater to the requirements of the small-scale sector as an apex bank. I mean, it's not the retail kind of an activity. The second announcement is that you know that for new projects, I mean, there were a lot of complaints that the new entrepreneur finds it a bit difficult if he is small and so on, to raise working capital at the same time that his project is cleared for investment by a term lending institution. It has been decided that up to 2.5 lakhs, the entire amount, including working capital, will come from the same source, same bank or same institution which is financing the term capital. This is a very major announcement, by the way.
Yes.
And housing, you had referred to housing, but I think we can come back to it.
We can come back to that, yeah. The small scale sector is quite important. Can I just, they're waiting to actually go to Bombay.
Oh, let's go to
of course, there's nothing much actually so far in the budget. That comes in part B, and it's obviously a long budget because the finance minister is still going strong, and we're waiting for more from him. But in Bombay, let's see what the stock exchange has to say about what's happened so far.
Well, welcome back to Bombay, viewers. The information with me here is that the trading activity started around 5 p.m. and is likely to continue up to 7:30. So that makes it approximately around 1 hour and 15 minutes so far. To assist me here, I have with me Mr. Kampani, who is the president of the Bombay Stock Exchange. Mr. Kampani. Mr. Kampani, we've had figures about the increase in deficit, defense, energy, power sectors, etc. What impact do you think these figures are likely to have on the stock exchange?
See, actually the initial reaction on the stock prices was good because the deficit for the current year was only 6,080, which was below the expectation, market expectation. And the deficit for the current year was, for the next year was 8,120 crores. And the defense expenditure also is reasonably stepped up, was 13,000 crores. That will be good. And food and fertilizer subsidy, which has been increased to 5,300 crores, will definitely help to increase the prices of fertilizer shares.
I would also like to introduce to you Mr. M.R. Maya. He is the executive director of the exchange. Mr. Maya, do you have any figures to empirically support what Mr. Kampani has just said?
Well, there has been good activity on the stock market initially, and the prices did look up, although marginally. Subsequently, however, the prices have dipped a bit. Our index, which had risen by about 5 to 6 points in the pre-budget session to 411.22, remained steady at 411, although latest I'm told it's around 406.
What has been the volume of turnover so far?
Well, the turnover in the market increased quite significantly in the pre-budget session. It should have been of the order of about 20 to 25 crores of rupees as against the normal turnover these days of about 20 to 20 crores.
But so far
I am told the activity is quite brisk on the trading floor. We could end up today with a turnover of about 25 to 30 crores in the post-budget session.
There was an interesting observation by the finance minister about the raising of the dividend limits separately under section 80L to 3,000 rupees.
This has been a long overdue request, or rather demand, from the stockbroking community.
Has it had any impact?
Yes, certainly. This has been awaited by the stockbroking community and the investors in the country as a whole. The limit, exclusively exemption limit of 3,000 rupees announced by the finance minister under section 80L is a welcome feature.